Sorry. Yeah. So, namaste. Welcome all of you for the second breakout session. We will be discussing on the topic of how to globalize Indian culture for creating global impact. So, our speakers for the session are Sri Amish Tripathi ji, Sanjay Anandram ji, and we have our moderator Ratan Sharda ji. Amish Tripathi ji is a diplomat, author, and columnist. So he has taken over as the director of the Nehru Center in London in October 2019. Amish ji has been listed as among the 50 most popular Indians by India Today magazine in 2019. Forbes India has ranked Amish ji among the 100 most influential celebrities in India. He was also selected as an Eisenhower Fellow, a prestigious American program for outstanding leaders from around the world in 2014. Amish ji published his first book in 2010 and has written 9 books till date. His books have sold 5 million plus copies and have been translated into 10 Indian and 9 international languages. Amish ji is an alumni of the prestigious IIM Calcutta, and he has been working he worked over 14 years in financial services industry before turning into writing. And we also have Sri Anandram ji. Thank you, Anandram ji, for joining with us in the last minute. Hari ji is not able to join with us due to some issues. So thank you, Sanjay Anandram ji, for joining with us today. Sir has over 30 years of experience as an entrepreneur, corporate executive, investor, and advisor mentor, mostly in technology industry. He sits on the board of several public and private companies and is actively involved in several technology focused funds and startups. He's a co-founder of a non-profit network of Indian cultural enterprises that aims to build brand India by enabling Indian culture entrepreneurship. He is also a contributor to Swarajya magazine and writes and lectures extensively on innovation and the need to think differently for transforming our cultural offerings. So we also have Ratan Sharda ji. He's an author, columnist, a renowned TV panelist. He publishes and edited over 16 books on wide range of subjects, awarded PhD on RSS. He is also an eminent jury of SMART. Welcome you all, sir. So over to Ratan Sharda ji.
Namaskar, all the guests and the speakers. It's an honor. I thank SMART to make me the host of this program with 2 of the most eminent people, and I'm lucky to be talking to them. Of course, Amish is an old friend, but no, I'm nowhere near his stature, but we are friends anyways. So good to have you around, Amish, and good to have you, Sanjay ji, at the last moment. The topic given to us is how to globalize Indian culture for creating global impact. So as I was trying to go through various pointers, in 2013, Modi ji famously said, India's journey has gone from snake charmers to mouse charmers. So from there, if you see that Modi ji has used and utilized the power of the NRS and PIOs across the globe, including having a wonderful meeting in Shanghai. But the point that people could not see that Modi ji was not trying to project himself. He was actually projecting the power of the Indian diaspora, Indian PIOs and NRI across the world, and tell the countries where they were that the kind of assets they are to that particular nation. That exactly is the point we want to make when we talk of impact, globalized impact of the Indian community. It is not the first time that it has happened. Now what we are seeing is not something new, but it is something very different. To begin with, we had ICWA, Indian Council of World Affairs, way back in 2043, in which Gandhiji also spoke in August 1947. Then we had ICCR, Indian Council for Cultural Relations, way back in 1950. And famously, Rajiv Gandhi started Festival of India, which was a super hit in 1985 onwards, at least from the media reports, was very good. Then what exactly, why this didn't impact us, and what we think about globalization and to project Indian image. I'll just read 2 small extracts from a report of India Today, 2 reports in fact, about the California report The report says Sonia presented Nancy with the ivory Mughal miniature portraits of Emperor Akbar and Empress Jodhabai. And Rajiv presented Reagan with M.F. Hussain horse painting. If we compare to what Modi ji offers today as a gift, we will realize the different approach to our Indian culture and how wonderful the progress began. The report says Paris is everything, but today we bring India to you. That was Rajiv Gandhi. If anybody in the select gathering was skeptical about Rajiv Gandhi's words, he only had to peer 187 feet down from the Ballet France restaurant on the first floor of Eiffel Tower to look down at the sprawling, rapturous spectacle unfolding in the vast expanse between the tower and the Trocadero. The Indian tricolor fluttered everywhere. Luminous Ahmedabadi kites snaked and darted across the grey skies. Camels and elephants ambled in the front of the pavilions. So this is the kind of spectacle that Festival of India was trying to create. But in the real sense, what had happened? That till 2000, year 2000, the PIOs, the Indian diaspora, was taken as a liability, not an asset. And we have many examples of that. But in year 2000, under Vajpayee government, we saw a sudden change in the attitude. We saw NRA swarming with the funds to support India after the nuclear blast explosion. We also know that in 2013, for the first time, we had Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. 2004, we had a ministry under the External Affairs Ministry for specifically NRIs. So that is the distance we have traveled. But if this is the distance we have traveled, despite so many efforts or with so many institutions, have we been able to create the impact we wish to create? That is a question we have to look at. And what is the kind of culture we are talking about? Because I remember way back in year 2000, I think I had met a few PIOs from Fiji. They said if we go to consulate, the embassy there, we talk in Hindi, but they talk back to us in English. And that is the attitude of our embassies in most of the places till this government came in. So is culture a very elitist concept? Or are we talking of culture that everyday Indian in the world, outside and inside, projects to the world? So these are some basic issues on which I'll start. I request now Amishji to give his presentation, then we can move on to other questions and people's interests. So Amishji, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ratanji, for your opening remarks. Thank you so much, Sanjayji, for joining us. Absolute pleasure to be on the same platform as you. I think, look, as far as our culture is concerned, and speaking as someone who's deeply enthusiastic about it and has been working on this in this sphere for over a decade now, writing books, etc. on this. And also now based in London, in a Western country. I am the director of the Nehru Center, which is a part of ICCR, which you mentioned, Sanjayji. The Nehru Center is the cultural wing of the Indian High Commission here. So there are a few things which strike me straight away. One, India's cultural footprint cannot exist independently. It has to be built on our economic and military strength. Soft power cannot exist without hard power. There are countries which will have hard power but may not have soft power. That happens, right? But for a country to have soft power and no hard power, that is rare. At least I'm not aware of any examples like this at any point of time in history. So the fact that India was economically an underperformer for most of its time, post-independence, because of poor economic choices we chose socialism, which has a unbroken record of economic destruction wherever it has been tried. So therefore we suffered economically because of that. And because of that, even militarily, I guess we weren't as we were punching below our weight. Geopolitically, we were punching below our weight. And that, of course, therefore reflected in our cultural footprint as well. I was recently, pre-pandemic, invited to a release of a global soft power report, which was launched from here in London. And I was I was invited to speak out there. Former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon inaugurated the speech. I was the only Indian on stage. I was the only Indian if you included people among the audience as well. And India just about barely made it to the top 50, considering we're the 5th largest economy in the world. That was that should have been a shocker for us. But what the makers of the report said is that actually India's ranking had risen. We were even lower. So for those who say that India may have a positive or a negative image in the West or in the larger world, the real problem is bigger. India actually has almost no image. We are ignored largely. That is the reality. It will change as we become bigger. But the scale of India is almost is not understood in the West. That we are actually 20% of humanity. So that's the first point. As our hard power grows, soft power will also grow. I think the second thing, Ratanji, you said it rightly, that we don't really speak of our own culture. We don't speak of our temples. We don't speak of our ancient traditions. We speak more about, it's true of our history books, it's true of our culture that we project. We speak more about the culture and history of those who invaded us rather than our ancestors who actually defended our culture against those foreigners. And I won't make it a religious specific thing. The invaders were Turks or the Europeans. We, of course, have Indian Hindus, but we also have Indian Buddhists, Indian Jains, Indian Sikhs, and Indian Muslims, Indian Christians are a part of our culture. We cannot confuse that with Turkic and European invaders. And we ended up speaking more about them when we spoke of our culture internationally. The third thing that strikes me is, and I'm speaking this as an Indian now living in London, as an NRI, the Indian community has outperformed in the West and actually across most of the world. If you look at it economically from most ways, Indians are in most countries the highest earning, among the highest earning communities in the country, in the countries that Indians are based in. Indians are often called the model minority because economically we outperform, educationally we outperform, crime rates are actually low. There was a massive scandal in the UK, in Rotterdam and various other cities recently where an immigrant community was responsible for the mass rapes in the thousands of young native British girls, and no Indians were associated with it. It was descendants of a neighboring country of ours, our western neighbor. So Indians actually have a good reputation in the West, in much of the world. However, we tend to underperform politically and culturally. So though we are very successful economically, educationally, etc., we haven't really leveraged that power into politics, into the cultural sphere. It's only appearing now, slowly. So this will also therefore impact how the mother country, how India is also seen. These are the three broad things that I see at this point of time. And it is certainly an exciting time to be someone who's passionate about Indian culture, because I suspect that we will see massive changes over the next generation, over the next 20-25 years. That's how I end my speech. Ratanji, back to you.
Thank you, Amishji. I think the point you made is excellent, that without hard power, there is no soft power. I remember the story I was told about Kabaddi exhibition match in way back in Japanese Olympics, and people loved the game, but they said we won't play it. When asked why, they said that it's a slave country. They have no strength. So how can you play their game? That is the level of respect one gives to the strength that one has. And also, for many, it's shocking that when we say that India has no image at all. And as you rightly pointed out, our history, our approach to history has been all through projecting the invaders, rightly or wrongly. Of course, wrongly, I would say, but that's the way the history has been so far. We know the recent fracas in the Litfest recently, where the pro-invasion historians met people who are trying to present a new picture of new history, which is actually history, but history which is suppressed. And that is why we are self-deprecating view of our own selves. And now, from the proponent of ancient India, the exponent of modern technical India, technology power. Sanjay ji, welcome.
Thank you very much. Namaste. Thanks, Amish. I entirely agree with your first proposition that without economic might, soft power has no meaning. Nobody cares. For example, sitting in India today, do we care what Papua New Guinea talks about or what the Republic of Congo is doing? We honestly don't care, right? It's a similar thing if you're sitting in New York. Now, let me present some facts which I think are important for us to keep in mind to stay grounded on this particular proposition that we're discussing today. June 21st was declared a World Yoga Day, right? And now we celebrate it thanks to the UN and the PM's push. Yoga is an $80 billion global industry. Do we have a single Indian yoga brand? Why not? Turmeric latte, we will pay $6 to $8 at Starbucks in New York's Fifth Avenue. Do we pay anything for a haldi doodh? Why not? There are 3 million Indians in America, amongst the wealthiest model minority, like Amish very aptly characterized them. There are 5,000 Indian restaurants in the US. Do you know how many Thai restaurants there are? More than the number of Indian restaurants, 5,400 odd Thai restaurants in the US. And how many Thai Americans exist? About 300,000, right? Now, that's the harsh reality. Now, we can look at it any which way. The fact of the matter is, if we want to really shift the discourse, we have to dig deep and understand how Thailand did it. In fact, there's a fantastic playbook that the Thais have with regard to how they took their restaurants and their cuisine, their chefs, their ingredients, their recipes, their entrepreneurs, their grant-making mechanism around the world. It has to be based upon all of those elements. You take Korea, which is a $27,000 per capita country. Thailand is $6,600 per capita. Korean soft power is sweeping the world today. India is not unaffected by Korean soft power. And all of it started when? 1998, when Korea began on all of this. Thanks to a PPP model. Foreign tourists went up 75% in Korea between 2003 and 2004. Tax incentives, subsidies, you name it. They generate $12.3 billion in pop culture exports, which is cosmetics, which is music, which is video games and stuff like that, okay? China is a $13,000 per capita country. Its propaganda ministry budget per year is $10 billion. India's MEA budget per year is $2 billion. MEA budget, not for propaganda. So number of tourists who came to India in 2019 is about 18 million, 1.8, which is equal to what all of Singapore received. Okay. Now, tourism is a strategic industry for us. It is interministerial, but the Ministry of Tourism has zero powers. Why? Because infrastructure, roads, power, security, everything else is with all other ministries except tourism. So why isn't tourism a strategic priority for this country? Generates enormous employment, generates huge goodwill, people travel, huge investments in infrastructure. People come see all the lovely tourist circuits that we have. Japanese tourists will come to Gaya, Koreans will come to Ayodhya, all of those things. But we don't think like that. We don't think in strategic, economic, commercial terms. We are lost in metaphysics, not in physics. That is the first point I wish to make. Second, if you think about, therefore, what is it that needs to happen? All our great cultural assets, why aren't we unleashing our economic might through our entrepreneurs on creating value out of all of this? We've been looking at all our cultural assets from the lens of development, maintenance, preservation, history, all of those things. Why not look at it from the market side, from the demand side? How many people go to museums in India? What is the condition of our museums? What is our education system with regard to art history and curation? We don't even have a single course in India on that. Nobody knows how to maintain old archived material, right? I mean, that is where investment must come. It must be based on cold, hard science and logic, not on emotion. And we have to treat culture as an economic asset that we have. We're bestowed upon thousands of years of all of it. Shanaz Hussain, who makes herbals, she said, I have the greatest power in my hand. 5,000 years of history is in the palm of my hand. Why should I have a problem selling this to the world? We don't sell Ayurveda to the world. Swami Vivekananda went to the US in 1893. He had the West eating out of his hands. What have we done with that? Nothing. Barring a few more gurus who went there, right from Yogi Paramahamsa now to Sadhguru and others, and transcendental meditation. What is the economic value to India that we have received? I would argue that the economic value to India has been negligible. You take quantum physics, all the great German scientists, whether it is Schrödinger, right, whether it's Oppenheimer, all the great scientists who came up with the foundations of quantum physics, all of them influenced by Vedanta. What have we done about it? Nothing. Nikola Tesla, the most valuable car company today is Tesla, named after the great inventor Nikola Tesla, highly influenced by Indian Vedanta and Swami Vivekananda. What have we done with that? Nothing. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, all great philosophers, Mark Twain, all of them have written extensively about India, and so have thousands of people. What have we done about it? Apart from writing in books saying that all these people said great things about India, what have we done to further that legacy? What have we built? Have we built institutions? Have we looked at markets? Have we created standards? We have not done any of this. And I'm afraid if we don't think in terms of strategic intent, which is institutions, standards, and markets, I'm afraid we are going to keep having this conversation until such time as our per capita income rises to a level where it becomes inevitable that our soft power, our entrepreneurs, and all our great cultural assets will start getting exploited, right? And that is a big thought I would like to leave behind with the audience today, that we have to think of these in strategic, economic, control of markets, control of standards, and create those institutions that further that cause. It is not going to happen through sentiment. It is not going to happen through emotion. It is through cold, hard, dedicated work based on knowledge and actual research, and using modern technology is the only way we're going to further this. I'll stop for now.
Wonderful, Sanjay ji. You made some very blunt points, and most of them are taken well. And I remember that when the sponsorship of some national assets was given to private companies, people said, "Bech dala, you have sold out." So the very idea of having sponsors to take care of those monuments was treated as sold out. So the way we think, the way we behave, our poverty of mind has not changed actually. Problem is that we still live in that communist left mindset where we are so poor about ourselves. Our poverty of thinking, poverty of mind is what really stops we becoming modern, going ahead. We can see decaying monuments, we can see crumbling monuments. AS has no money, it has no manpower. And as you rightly said, the tourism and other ministries, though there is some integration now, but not really in the sense that it should be, the way it should be. But it has begun, I believe. But naturally, it is taken very well. And you talked about with building institutions, that's a big weakness. In China, in fact, has Confucius centers, as Seshadri ji from the audience points out. So something of similar line, where a huge chain of wonderful institutions is something that can be done. And ICCR and these institutions which are present in more than half of the countries, we have cultural attaches in the embassies. What role they play is also very important to see. I think the beginning was made, but somewhere down the line, we are still stuck in more in foreign affairs than in really is making the soft power as the tool of our approach to foreign policy itself. And this is what that scholar in Nature magazine which I was reading talked about, that only under Modi have we talked about using this as a cultural asset and as part of our foreign policy doctrine. I welcome questions from the audience, or I will start asking questions. If not, if there is any question comes from the audience, Anurag is there, I believe. Anurag, do you have to add anything? before somebody speaks up, my question is, how do you define Indian culture? Amishji, can you respond to that? When we say Indian culture, how do you define Indian culture? The IT power, or we talk about the ancient history and our ancient knowledge? What exactly is the Indian culture?
So is the question to me?
So both can answer. My question is one by one. So Amishji can take up first. How do you define, what do you really define Indian culture? Because we say Bharati culture, we see that we were offering paintings of Mughals when visiting overseas. We had only Taj to show to people till Modi ji took the Chinese premier all the way to Chennai or Sabarmati. So this approach to culture, how exactly do you define the culture we're talking about?
It's a challenge to define it, because actually India is the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive. So we have a more ancient, China is not pre-Bronze Age. China is around maybe 3,500, 4,000 years old. So we have the oldest surviving legacy to take care of and to propagate. We are continental in our proportions. We are 1/5 of humanity. Most European countries are smaller than an average state in India. So India has more people than North America and Europe and much of Middle East combined. So in terms of languages, in terms of in terms of in everything, music, art, drama, there's nonsense that's told to us that our ancestors didn't write. The nonsense that British convinced us, and sadly we continue to believe it. Our ancestors wrote a hell of a lot. The National Mission for Manuscript has tabulated some 3 million Sanskrit manuscripts, and there are probably many more that have not been tabulated. That's more than the rest of the ancient world combined. So our culture is so vast and so ancient that it's difficult to encompass it crisply in one line. But the thing that's very clear is that till now, much of what was communicated was either focused on our invaders or excessively focused on Delhi. And there is and the real India is obviously not about the invaders. And there is a vast, and I'm not denying the importance of Delhi. Of course, it's an important region. But there is a vast India outside of Delhi. So both of them need to be covered when we communicate what our culture should be. And Mother India's heart is big enough to incorporate many narratives, except that the narrative must come from the real India and must encompass all of India, not be Delhi and Northwest Indian subcontinent focused.
Sanjay ji, your view.
Yeah. So
because when we say want to create impact, what exactly do you mean?
So I think, yes.
See,
Sharda ji, what is Indian culture is very vast as a topic. It can cover food, it can cover crafts, it can cover arts, it can cover literature, it can cover, an ocean of things going back into thousands of years. So rather than tie ourselves in knots, trying to define it specifically, because the very definition of culture itself is vague. It's important for us to focus on a few areas that we think have merit to push that. So what is our problem? Is our problem that we don't have enough culture, or is our problem in taking whatever we have to the world? I believe it is the latter. Let us assume all of us wake up tomorrow morning and we say Vijayanagara Empire is there in all our books. Everybody has studied it. Very good. Everybody has become aware of it. We understand it very, very well. My question is, so what? How does the rest of the world know it? How does tourism into India, thanks to Vijayanagara Empire, improve? How do we improve merchandise based upon the Vijayanagara Empire? How do we make movies about it? How do we make shows for children about it? How do we publish books about it? Where are the great authors who do all the research? Who's going to fund it? Right? I'm talking about it, thinking about it from the standpoint of markets. I'm frankly, it's all very well to say, yes, we're a wounded civilization. We've had serious challenges, all of them. I agree with everything. The question is, what are we doing about it? The world is not waiting around for us to keep, talking about these things, right? We have to seize the opportunity. And the opportunity is now. If we don't do it now, it's not going to happen. So I'm saying, let me take a simple example. You take, Diwali is coming up. Now, how many halwais, how many mithai walas have upgraded themselves to sell online, to become high quality branded mithai walas compared to the chocolate walas? Why haven't we done that? Who's supporting them? Right? They need marketing skills. They need websites. They need digital marketing capabilities. They need supply chain and process knowledge. They need to come up with new recipes, new designs, health conscious, all of those things. The layout of a typical Indian sweet shop, compare that with that of a chocolate shop or a cake shop. Automatically, you will see, right? A handful of companies, and I'm telling you because we have seen this. In Bangalore, there's a company called Anand Sweets. Okay, he's the only guy we are aware of who is modernizing, who's using technology, who's reaching out to large numbers of people, who's creating special packaged Diwali sweets, not by harking to the old tradition. To the youngster, will a 30-year-old young couple order mithai, a modern couple in a cosmopolitan city, or will they order chocolates or cakes? That's the problem we have to solve, not by talking about the past. We all understand that, right? And that, in my mind, is the number one issue. Let me give you another example. We talk about tea or coffee or a whole host of things that we have, our food, our cuisine, right? I gave you the example of Thai cuisine in America. Why don't we have high quality Indian restaurants around the world? The Thai government gave loans of up to $3 million per entrepreneur. It was an interministerial effort that they put in and said we have to create 3,000 Thai restaurants, which means recipe. They trained chefs. They changed the visa rule of New Zealand to allow Thai chefs to go and practice in New Zealand. What have we done? What lobbies have we done? That is the hard work, Shardaji, and which is action on the ground. That is what I mean by the physics of all of this, action orientation.
True. Your line about talking more about metaphysics and physics actually.
Exactly. Yes, that's the key. Notice every conversation of ours, we get lost in metaphysics. ऐसा था, वैसा था, इसने ये किया, उसने वो किया, ठीक है, सब मानते हैं भाई, अब क्या करोगे बताओ?
Right. There is a question by Muthuraman who talks about using embassies effectively, but I think that is beyond the purview of somebody answering now. So I would not let it pass, because then when we try to lecture embassies about their job, I think it's difficult. But somebody who has taken the job of more of a diplomat, Amish, you want to add to that? What kind of experience is yours about embassies?
You want me to be honest here? No. I will.
Your choice.
There's in one of good batting in test matches is, when you see a ball on the offside and you do a well left, I will do a well left, please.
You are very
IPL season.
Yeah, I can. So I would not ask you to go straight into it explicitly. There is a suggestion by Venki about why not leverage the pre-existing models like IPL, Bollywood, etc., which is a cannon fodder. But before you answer, I think the answer lies in the way we were projected by the earlier films. When poverty was sold, even today, poverty is sold much better than anything about Indians, except Bahubali. We have not sold glorious India to people. We have sold our poverty. And IPL, yes. But if you look at the way even now OTT platforms are actually degrading our culture and society worldwide, I think this idea needs to be redefined, whether we have enough people and producers, writers who understand. I'll give a very funny example. A scriptwriter told me that famous OTT platform director called him, said, we want to make a movie on Karan and Arjun. But I want, this is a love triangle between Draupadi, Karan and Arjun. So this scriptwriter was so aghast, he said, sorry, I can't do it. But he said, I didn't do it, somebody else will do it. So I think therein lies the question, therein lies the answer to what you suggested, that till we have our people who actually are conscious about what we have, and if our producers who ask Premchand's biodata and somebody goes with a script, with a suggestion of a series on Premchand stories, you understand where we lack.
Can I add a couple of points, Shardaji?
Yeah.
With your permission, is it okay?
Sure.
Yeah, you talked of IPL, right? At iSpirit, we take the IPL example all the time. IPL is the only example where the playground, okay, metaphorically speaking, is designed by Indians. The rules of IPL are set by Indians. All the money that is in IPL comes from India. Only 4 foreign players are allowed per team. The audience is Indian, the platforms are Indian, the money is Indian, the sponsors are Indian, etc., etc., etc. Right? So we control, we dominate because the playground design is India, keeping in mind the vast audience. That is that what we call playground thinking is an important element in all of this. Playground thinking comes from thinking about markets. So the people who designed IPL are not the people who designed Test cricket. Kerry Packer designed the first T20, I mean, the first one-day series, which transformed everything. Lalit Modi came and transformed the T20 format. These are entrepreneurs who understand markets, who understand how things have to be packaged and sold and supported to reach vast audiences, the deals that have to be struck with platforms. Okay, you talked of OTT platforms. I'll give you a quick anecdote. Very well-known editor of perhaps one of the top editors of India once asked Steven Spielberg, why don't you make a film on our epics, the Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc., etc.? Because this Spielberg obviously is a big brand worldwide. Spielberg told him, I'm the wrong person you should be asking that question to. I know nothing about them. You should be making these movies in your country. Why don't you do that? To which this eminent editor, just smiled and looked away. I'm saying that is the kind of thinking that has to be changed, right? And that is the whole point.
Yeah, in fact, as you see, Bahubali was one example where we actually projected a wonderful image of India, and we had a glorious, though it was a fiction, we could have actual real life stories, histories like these. So I have another question which I have in mind is, are we able to use the NR and PO strength? I mean, though Modi ji was able to use that Project India in a much better way using PIO and NRI strength, but I believe it has not yet been fully exploited because the dismantling Hindutva conferences actually really gave a wake-up call to PIOs and NRIs across the world that how they're projected and what they need to do. Of course, there is a big pushback, but therein lies the whole strength of NRI PI, which has not yet been exploited fully. So what do you say, Sanjay, you want to take it first?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, NRIs, PIOs are a massive asset, right? The question is, and I'll again tell you, how we don't think of them as assets. We think of them as folks that we can reach out to whenever we want to. And for example, do we have a full database, for example? I'll give you an example. As part of iSpirit, I had been to Rwanda some years back, talking about our digital platforms, blah, blah, blah. The head of technology in their national bank and a few other places was somebody who had studied in Bangalore and gone there. Now, that person could have been an asset for us, right? But we don't think in such terms. An American would have absolutely, the entire database would be ready. They would have built relationships with that individual. Have we built that with our people there? With our own people who've been overseas for generations or even recent immigrants? What is the database we have? How do we use these people, except for fundraising and political rallies? Beyond that, what is going on? Or they want some incentives and subsidies for investing in real estate and some business here and there. That is what we will do. Beyond that, what has happened? Do we have any scheme for that? That's the point I'm trying to make. Unless we have strategic intent, which cuts across ministries and says, this is the focus of India for the next 20 years. It's not going to happen in 5 years. In these 20 years, these 5 sectors are going to become world leading with revenue generation, employment creation, etc., etc. And this is how we are going to have a public-private partnership, both within India and outside of India, right? That is the kind of thinking that has to happen. Without that, I'm afraid, like I said, we will keep having these conversations until such time as our per capita incomes becomes equal to that of China's, which will happen whenever.
Amishji, you have been interacting with the diaspora and the NRIs as an official representative of India in UK. So what is your experience about whether our PIOs and our NRIs really understand the strength they have, or whether they have been really utilized properly?
I think there has been improvement. I certainly won't deny that. Now, can we do a lot more? Yeah, of course we can. The way I see it is, you can always see glass half full, glass half empty. A lot of it changed with the attitude of Indians themselves. You are right, there are still attacks on our country, but after a long time, there's actually pushback now, right? The NRIs and PIOs are much more, closer attached to the country. There are Pravasi Bharatiya programs, and I must say, even by themselves, I have seen associations in the UK work very hard to propagate Indian culture, even if they have become British citizens of Indian origin. They do a lot more, and they carry their culture on their pride. There are on their sleeves, they carry it with pride. And there are Indians who are part of senior ministerial roles in the UK. They don't, unlike earlier, where many of them would hide their cultural background. Now, at least in the UK, from what I see, no, they don't. They very proudly will wear a kalava, very proudly talk of their Hindu faith. They will very proudly celebrate. They are British citizens. Let me clarify, of Indian origin, and this is how word of our culture spreads. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but there has been a lot of improvement over the last 30 years, post 1991. As India has grown wealthier, as India has grown more confident. You very rightly mentioned, the event Vikram Sampath's video that went viral. Many have been, Vikram himself has been speaking of this issue. Sanjeev Sanyal has been speaking of this issue. I have spoken of this issue. Hindol, so many others. But now, at least now, the push is happening at a much greater level. Many of the youth are getting aware of it. Before we make the rest of the world aware of our culture, we Indians ourselves have to become aware of our own culture. So many of us, when we were growing up, were convinced by what our education system told us, that the British created India, that Mother India didn't exist as a country before. But now there are so many modern Indians who are aware of what was written in the Vishnu Puran more than 2000 years ago. Uttaram yat samudrasya himadrayachaiva dakshinam varsham tad bharatam nama bharati yatra santati. Many people know this now. So these are improvements that are happening. Could we be better? Of course. Could our government become far more efficient? And I'm not a full-time bureaucrat. I'm not trying to defend the government. There are many things that the government can do better. But we certainly cannot deny that there are many things that have improved. Can you imagine top foreign dignitaries being taken to Gangaji at Kashi and witnessing a Aarti, and this being broadcast all over the world? Can you imagine foreign dignitary being taken to Mahabalipuram and our ancient history being subtly reinforced out there? Think of how many temples are being refurbished and rebuilt. It's not just the Ram Janmabhoomi Ji temple, Kashi Vishwanath Ji, the city where my father's family comes from. The Kashi Vishwanath Ji Dham is being constructed, and it's improving dramatically. Kedarnath Ji is being done. So many across. A National Institute for Ayurveda has been set up. We ourselves have organized programs at the Nehru Center and at the High Commission of India and the UK, and I know it is being organized in other parts of the world as well, where we are speaking of Ayurveda from a scientific, modern perspective. There is a program coming up out here in the UK which is being driven by the External Affairs Ministry, where Prince Charles's Trust and the External Affairs Ministry are jointly collaborating to have an Ayurveda Center of Excellence out here. I myself participated in a parliamentary, all-party parliamentary group of British parliamentarians just 4 days back on yoga, on how they want to incorporate yoga into the education system here. And they were speaking of yoga and pranayama. We are still in India debating, should yoga be taught to everyone in Indian education systems? Here was an all-party parliamentary group. Again, I was the only Indian out there. All of them, all the MPs, all the people were all native British. They were white-skinned. And they were speaking yoga is a perfect way to build health, to build long-term health, to as a preventative thing, and as a not just a supplement but as a replacement to Western medicine. Because and this was a British MP, again a native British MP, who said that Western medicine is too problem focused. It only comes into play when you actually have a serious problem and you need a surgery, whereas Ayurveda, pranayama, yoga can prevent those problems from coming up. Now, this is being debated in the UK in an all-party parliamentary group, and they're speaking seriously of rolling it out. Now, so these are things that are happening, which are very positive. Can we do more? Yes, of course. And I'm like, I'm an outsider, and I did a well left to a direct question that you asked me. Can our bureaucracy be more efficient? Of course we can. Of course it can. And speaking as a non-bureaucrat. But a lot of things have happened as well. A joint effort of Indians from India, the government, and one must acknowledge the strong contribution of the Indian community, PIOs and NRIs outside India, who've done a great service.
In fact, I have seen, when I've met youth in UK, USA, etc., and other countries, I found that the earlier generation who went there in 1960s has a different apologetic approach to their lifestyle, their culture, and also about the new generation is much more aggressive, much more confident, much more of what we have to project. And last question, which is a little, it can be controversial the way we look at it. Is culture only an elitist concept, or can culture be grassroots approach to culture is much more productive? Sanjay ji.
Culture is fundamentally from the grassroots, because people at the grassroots celebrate it with fervor and passion. It then gets perhaps in some cases appropriated by the elite, and they give it the bells and whistles and sort of an intellectual cover in a manner of speaking around it. But the core faith and the passion that drives culture is from the bottom. I mean, if you take our clothing, for example, right? Today, whether a Manyavar makes the vest, and it looks very nice and sort of smart and contemporary, but the fact of the matter is that it is made from the cloth, the design, everything else has been part of the tradition for God knows how many years, right? Whether it's our footwear, our food, all of it. Now I can take it, use a Michelin star chef to give it a very contemporary, modern, cosmopolitan look and feel. But the fact remains that it is still basic Indian cuisine, right? That has been transformed to suit palates around the world. Now, that is what I'm saying is a core driver that comes from the bottom, has to morph and become global through a process of interfacing with the market. You take all our arts, our crafts, these are all done by artisans and craftspeople from the ground up, right? No wealthy individual or elite is sitting there, but they are the market, right? If the market does not exist, the artisan or the craft person or the painter is not going to find a market for that enormous amount of talent that they have. So it has to be a jugalbandi between the market and those who create, right? I mean, those who are quote unquote the creators or purveyors or living embodiments of culture, whether they are dancers or painters or whatever field it may be. But if you don't have the economic angle to it, the market facing angle to it, it becomes entirely, I'm sad to say, use the term, but like a wasteful exercise. Because if I have a painting that nobody appreciates, nobody's willing to pay money for it, what happens to the life of the painter? How many of us have gone to museums on a regular basis? That's the question to ask, right? We talk of culture all very well. When was the last time we bought something of heritage that helped a artisan or a craftsperson of India? Right?
Well, in fact, till Modi ji came, there are numbers how many artifacts of Indian art were brought back to India and what is happened after.
Yeah, just look at that. I mean, the tragedy is an Amazon Karigar digital platform has 10 million people on its platform. Flipkart has 4 million. Why didn't we build it?
True.
These are the questions, hard questions we have to ask. And unless we find solutions to this, right, which is the market-facing solutions, I think it's going to be a tough challenge for us. That's my view.
Basically, you are talking of having a grassroots approach, because an elite won't get into that. He will call it impurity of the art. While you talk about using commerce to push the cultural agenda and take it up.
Yes.
So, Amishji, last comments on this question of whether culture is to be driven from ground up, or culture will remain an elite concept, and that may be the reason why we have not been able to impact the world.
I think different countries have different models. I have found in Europe, in many European countries, yes, culture can tend to be elitist. But as far as India is concerned, yeah, I agree with Sanjay ji, actually, because India's elite had culturally and emotionally, in many ways, seceded from India. They were more at home in London than in Tirupur or a Kashi or a Jaipur, frankly. So if Indian culture has remained alive, it's because of the love and attachment that the general masses had for our culture. What has happened again over the last 20-30 years because of economic reforms is that many from the real India, many from the non-elite India, have now broken the gates, the pearly gates of Lutyens' Delhi, and are now have a voice. So therefore, the culture of real India is now being expressed. This culture is something which plays out over many generations. Even as of now, though the power of the Anglo-Saxon world may be declining, the Anglophone world, their cultural power can still not be denied. And there's a reason why China invests so much money in Western movies, in Hollywood, or even in UK movies, and not in French movies or Iranian movies, which frankly, movie aficionados will tell you are of better quality. It's because the Anglophone world, the English-speaking world, has an outsized cultural power, which is a result of their outsized economic and military power till the recent past. Culture, changes slowly over time, and I think the rising economic, political power of the real India, as compared to the old elite, will impact the cultural conversation in India over time, and therefore will impact the conversation internationally about India as well. Net, in simple terms, Indian culture remained alive with the masses, but earlier the masses had very little power, social or economic power, so they couldn't really force their voice up. Now, the Indian, what were the non-elite classes, are getting increasing amounts of economic, political, social power. And that's changing the conversation within India and outside India.
I think this was a very interesting conversation, starting from the snake charmers and starting with elephants and pageants of camels and horses. We have come down to common people keeping the culture alive. And those are the people who can create impact if rightly supported by the government and commerce. I think that is the way forward. And that's the message. And we have unraveled many knotty threads. We have spoken very frankly about what exactly comprises culture, how it can be used, utilized, and how it can be furthered. So it was a wonderful conversation. Thanks, Sanjay ji. Thanks, Amish ji. for your
Thank you very
time.
much. Thank you.
I hand over the mic to the host. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ji. It was a very informative session. Thanks, Amish Ji, Sanjay Ji, and Ratan Ji for your valuable time. Much appreciated. Just an announcement for tomorrow, we have another interesting session in the plenary on agenda versus fact, gaining freedom from fake news. It would be from Anurag Saxena Ji and moderated by Vijay Chadha Ji. Following which we will have Smart Awards by 5 p.m. It's been 1 year's anniversary for Smart, and we are coming up with our annual awards. So that will be by tomorrow 5 p.m. Now we will have a short commercial break followed by Shanti Mantram to end the day for today. I would request to play the commercial break and then the Shanti Mantram. Thank you all very much.
मेरी बुक्स कहाँ हैं?
अरे मैंने सब लेबल किया हुआ है, वहां पे है। कुछ भी नहीं हुआ। बढ़िया चॉइस है यार तुम्हारी।
काफी स्ट्रॉन्ग है। लारा बाय बोरोसिल।
Broadcasting system and its affiliated stations.
What you staring at? Is it really me? Feeling like a star. Am I taking it too far? Taking it too far while I'm feeling like a star. Feeling like a star.
Always a star with stylish backpacks from Skybags. Built to last straps. 12 months international warranty and rain cover. Skybags.
Sahana bhavatu Sahano bhunaktu Sahaviryam karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvijavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
स्मार्ट का पद वीर पद, देश का पद जीत पद, प्रश्नों की तार से स्मार्ट का पद सजा, अन्याय को ना करके न्याय का प्रचार कर, देश पर प्रहार है, हार मत प्रहार कर, आज कर, आवाज कर, तांडव सा युद्ध कर, स्मार्ट का प्रचार कर। स्मार्ट हमरारा, स्मार्ट हमरारा, स्मार्ट हमरारा, स्मार्ट हमरारा, स्मार्ट हमरारा, स्मार्ट हमरारा।
All nationalistic media join Smart and make nation strong.